Alice hurried down the bustling city sidewalk, her backpack slung over one shoulder, books clutched tightly against her chest. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the park she passed every day on her way home from college. Today, however, something caught her eye. A figure nestled against the rough bark of an old oak tree, shrouded in shadows. Intrigued, she slowed her pace, peering closer. As she approached, her heart sank. A man, unkempt and weary, lay curled up in a tattered blanket. His clothes were dirty and worn, and his face was etched with lines of hardship. Alice felt an overwhelming urge to help him, a rush of empathy washing over her. "Hey," she called softly, kneeling beside him. "Are you okay?" The man stirred, blinking against the fading light. His eyes, a deep shade of blue, met hers with a mix of surprise and wariness. "I'm fine," he replied, his voice raspy, yet somehow gentle. "Just trying to get some rest." Alice frowned, her compassion outweighing her caution. "You don't look fine. Do you need something to eat? I can help." She rummaged through her bag, pulling out a granola bar. "Please take this." He hesitated for a moment, then slowly reached out. "Thank you," he murmured, accepting the offering. As he unwrapped the bar, Alice couldn't help but notice the subtle tremor in his hands, the signs of someone who had seen too much suffering. "I'm Alice," she said, trying to keep the conversation going. "What's your name?" "Eric," he replied, taking a bite of the granola bar. "I used to be a teacher, but life, it doesn't always go as planned, does it?" He offered a sad smile, and Alice could see the flicker of memories behind his eyes. "I'm sorry," Alice said, her heart aching for him. "What happened?" Eric sighed, his gaze drifting to the ground. "Lost my job, then my home. One thing led to another, and here I am." There was a heaviness in his tone that suggested more than just misfortune. It was a world of despair he had come to accept. Alice felt a pang of anger rise within her. How could anyone let this happen to someone like Eric? "That's not fair," she said, frowning. "Everyone deserves a chance." He chuckled softly, a sound devoid of mirth. "You're kind, Alice. Not many people think that way anymore. But kindness can be dangerous, you know?" "I don't care," she replied defiantly. "If everyone thought like you, nothing would ever change." She took a deep breath, steeling herself against the weight of his reality. "I want to help you." Just as she spoke, a familiar voice pierced the evening air. "Alice, there you are." It was Jenna, one of her college friends, her tone laced with concern. "You shouldn't be hanging around here alone." Alice turned to face her friend, feeling the tension rise. "I'm just talking to Eric," she said, gesturing towards him. "He needs help." Jenna's expression shifted to disbelief. "Help? Alice, he's homeless. You don't know anything about him. It's not safe to engage with people like that." Her voice dropped to a whisper, as if the very mention of Eric's status could summon danger. Eric's face fell, and Alice felt a wave of frustration. "What's wrong with wanting to help someone?" she shot back, irritation flickering in her tone. "Just because he's homeless doesn't mean he's dangerous." Jenna crossed her arms, her stance defensive. "I know you have a big heart, but you have to be careful. You can't save everyone." Alice narrowed her eyes at her friend. "I'm not trying to save everyone. I just want to help him. Why can't you understand that?" The tension hung thick in the air as Jenna sighed, her posture softening slightly. "Just think about it, okay? You don't know what you're getting into." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Alice feeling conflicted. As she watched Jenna retreat, a sense of determination welled up within her. She looked back at Eric, who was watching the exchange with a mix of curiosity and sadness. "I'm sorry about that," she said softly. "People can be, well, they don't see the bigger picture." "It's all right," Eric replied, his voice calm. "Most people prefer to look away. It's easier that way." Alice shook her head. "It's not right. I want to help you, Eric. I really do." He regarded her with a steady gaze, and for a brief moment, the weight of the world seemed to lift, if only slightly. "If you're serious about that, you might be in for a long journey." "I'm ready," Alice declared, her heart racing with newfound conviction. "Whatever it takes." Little did she know, the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but in that moment, standing in the fading light of the park, a bond began to form, one that would change both their lives forever. Alice sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, surrounded by stacks of canned goods and boxes of pasta, her heart racing with anticipation. The food drive she had organized at college was just around the corner, and she was eager to make a difference for those who had been marginalized and overlooked. The thought of Eric, with his gentle smile and kind eyes, motivated her even more. He had shared stories of his life, revealing not only his struggles, but also the hope that resided within him. As she arranged the food, she could almost hear his voice encouraging her. But in the back of her mind lingered the shadow of her stepmother, Vanessa. Alice knew she had to tread carefully. Vanessa had a way of turning everything Alice loved into a battleground. Just as she pondered this, her bedroom door swung open with a creak, and Vanessa stepped inside. Her expression a mix of curiosity and disdain. "What is all this?" Vanessa asked, her tone dripping with condescension as she surveyed the makeshift collection. "It's for the food drive at school," Alice replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm gathering donations for the homeless." Vanessa scoffed, crossing her arms. "You do realize that helping the homeless is a waste of time, don't you? They're just going to squander whatever you give them. It's not your responsibility to save the world, Alice." Alice felt her heart sink. "They're people, Mom. They deserve help. Not everyone is beyond saving. Not everyone is worth saving," Vanessa shot back, her eyes narrowing. "You think this is some kind of charity project to make you feel good about yourself? I won't have you wasting our resources on lost causes." Alice clenched her fists, fighting to keep her frustration in check. "You don't understand. Eric is..." "Eric? The homeless man?" Vanessa interrupted, her voice rising. "I've heard enough. If you're going to keep associating with him, you can forget about your allowance. I won't fund your misguided mission to rescue people who don't want to be rescued." Alice felt the familiar rush of anger wash over her, but she refused to let Vanessa win this time. "I don't care about my allowance. I care about helping others, even if you don't see their worth." With that, Vanessa turned sharply on her heel, leaving the room in a flurry of disapproval. Alice let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. For the first time, she felt the weight of her own convictions pressing against the suffocating grip of her stepmother's harsh words. The next day, fueled by determination, Alice walked through the bustling campus, her heart pounding as she approached her friends. "I'm organizing a food drive for the homeless," she announced, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her stomach. "I want to give them a voice, and I need your help." "Are you serious?" One friend, Jenna, replied, her eyes wide. "What if it doesn't work? What if they don't want our help?" Alice shook her head. "That's not the point. We can't just assume they won't accept our kindness. We have to try." As her friends began to rally behind her, excitement sparked in the air. They discussed flyers and social media strategies, and Alice felt her spirit lift. She was not alone in this fight. They would make a difference, and perhaps even change the hearts of others along the way. Later that week, Alice stood on the stage in the campus auditorium, a microphone in hand, her heart racing as she looked out at the sea of students gathered before her. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice strong. "Today, we're not just collecting food. We're collecting stories. Stories of resilience, of strength, and of hope. I'd like to invite Eric to join us and share his journey with you." As Eric stepped onto the stage, the audience fell silent. Alice watched as he took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly. But when he began to speak, his voice was steady. He shared snippets of his life, the joys of teaching, the heartbreak of losing his job, and the spiral that followed. His words resonated with the audience, and Alice felt a surge of pride. But as the applause erupted, she caught a glimpse of Vanessa in the back of the room, arms crossed, her expression a mask of fury. Alice's heart raced. She knew Vanessa would not take this lightly. As soon as the food drive concluded, she could almost hear the wheels turning in her stepmother's mind, plotting how to undermine her efforts. And indeed, she was right. Later that evening, Vanessa confronted her, a smirk playing on her lips. "I saw your little event today, Alice. You really think you can change the world?" I'm trying to make a difference, Alice replied defiantly. Let's see how long that lasts, Vanessa said ominously, her eyes glinting with a dangerous mix of anger and amusement. You'll regret this. Alice felt a chill run down her spine. Vanessa's threats were never empty, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was brewing beneath the surface. But she refused to let fear dictate her actions. With each passing day, her resolve to help Eric and others like him only grew stronger. She was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, fueled by the hope that they could all find redemption together. As the sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the park, the atmosphere at the food drive was initially one of hope and goodwill. Alice stood behind a makeshift table, her heart swelling with pride as students and community members joined in to support the cause she had poured her heart into. The air was filled with laughter and chatter, the sounds of people coming together to help those in need. However, that sense of unity was about to be shattered. Vanessa, Alice's stepmother, had arrived unannounced, her presence like a dark cloud looming over the cheerful gathering. She surveyed the scene, her eyes narrowing as she spotted Eric among the crowd. With a calculated smile, she strode confidently toward the gathering, her heels clicking ominously against the pavement. Alice's stomach twisted in knots at the sight of her. Ladies and gentlemen, Vanessa's voice rang out, sharp and commanding, cutting through the cheerful noise. The crowd turned, curiosity piqued. I believe it's important to know exactly who you're supporting here. Alice's heart raced as she stepped forward. Vanessa, this isn't the time. Oh, but it is, dear Alice. Vanessa's smile widened, a predatory gleam in her eyes. You see, I have some information that might change your minds about this, man. She gestured dramatically toward Eric, who stood frozen at the edge of the crowd, confusion etched on his face. What are you talking about? Alice demanded, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and fear. I think it's time everyone learned about Eric's past, Vanessa continued, her words dripping with malice. He's not just some unfortunate soul. He's a criminal, a thief and a con artist who took advantage of others before he ended up here. Gasps erupted from the crowd, and Alice felt her heart drop. That's not true, she exclaimed, her voice rising above the murmurs of disbelief. Eric is not a criminal. He's... Enough, Alice. Vanessa interrupted, her tone icy. You've let your misguided compassion blind you to the truth. This man is dangerous. What kind of example do you think you're setting for your friends? The crowd began to disperse, whispers of doubt swirling around Alice like a storm. She turned to Eric, who stood with his shoulders slumped, his expression a mixture of hurt and disbelief. Eric, please, she pleaded, stepping toward him. Tell them it's not true. Eric's eyes were downcast, and he shook his head slowly. Alice, I don't want to cause you any more trouble. Just let them think what they want. No. Alice's voice cracked, desperation clawing at her throat. You don't have to hide. You deserve to be heard. But Vanessa, reveling in her triumph, continued to feed the crowd with venomous words. He was arrested for stealing from a school. He lost everything because of his own choices. Do you really want to support someone like that? With her heart shattered, Alice turned back to Vanessa, her anger boiling over. How could you do this? You're tearing people apart just to prove a point. Vanessa's expression hardened, her smile replaced by a steely glare. I'm protecting you, Alice. You need to focus on your future, not on lost causes. This man will only drag you down. Alice shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. You don't get to decide that for me. I won't let you ruin this. The confrontation left Alice feeling hollow, the air thick with tension as she watched the crowd slowly dissipate, their faces a mix of pity and skepticism directed at Eric. She could hardly breathe, the weight of her stepmother's words pressing down on her like a heavy stone. As the last of the attendees left, Alice turned to find Eric still standing there, his expression unreadable. I'm so sorry, she whispered, her heart breaking for him. This isn't who you are. Eric finally met her gaze, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resignation. It's okay, Alice. You tried. That's more than most would do. No, it's not okay, she insisted, frustration and pain bubbling over. I won't let this be the end. I'll find a way to clear your name. Don't, Eric replied, a hint of anguish in his voice. You don't owe me anything. But I do, Alice protested, clenching her fists. You've been nothing but kind to me, and I won't abandon you now. I'll figure this out, I promise. As she spoke, determination surged through her veins. Heartbroken but resolute, she made a silent vow to herself. She would not let Vanessa's cruelty define her or Eric's future. She would fight for him, no matter the cost. Alice sat at her cluttered desk, the afternoon sun streaming through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the light. She flipped through the stack of papers and old photographs she had unearthed in her home, each one connected to her stepmother Vanessa. It was a long shot, but if there was a thread to pull, she was determined to find it. Her heart raced as she recalled Eric's words, his voice tinged with hurt and disbelief when he had learned of Vanessa's betrayal. The truth was buried somewhere, and it was Alice's mission to uncover it. Why would she do this to him? She muttered to herself, running a hand through her hair in frustration. The connection between their families was like a ghost haunting her. She needed help, someone who could lend a fresh pair of eyes to the investigation. That someone was Jake, her best friend since childhood, who had always been by her side, no matter how crazy the idea. She grabbed her phone and dialed his number, her stomach fluttering with a mix of hope and anxiety. Jake, can you come over? I need your help with something important. Sure, Alice. What's going on? Jake's voice was cheerful, oblivious to the weight of the situation. Just come over, please. I'll explain everything when you get here, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. When Jake arrived, Alice wasted no time. She spread the photographs and papers across the table, pointing out the connections she had made. Look at this, she urged, sliding a picture of a younger Vanessa standing next to Eric at a school event. They knew each other. I think she played a part in his downfall. Jake leaned closer, examining the images with a furrowed brow. This is interesting, but do you have any concrete evidence? Alice chewed on her lip, the frustration bubbling back up. Not yet, but I need to talk to Eric again, find out what he knows. Maybe he remembers something that can help us. All right, I'm in. Let's figure this out together, Jake said, his enthusiasm providing a much-needed boost. They decided to track Eric down and find him before the sun set. Alice held on to the hope that in their conversation, he might reveal more about the past that had been obscured by his experiences. As they walked through the city streets, Alice felt a mix of fear and determination. The homeless community had always embraced Eric, and she knew that once they reached him, he would willingly share his story if it meant finding his truth. Upon arriving at the park where they had first met, Alice's heart sank at the sight of the empty benches. What if he's gone? She whispered, a knot forming in her stomach. Let's check the nearby shelters, Jake suggested. He might have gone there after everything that happened. They walked to a small shelter a few blocks away, peering through the windows. Inside, they spotted familiar faces, but Eric was not among them. Just as they were about to leave, a soft voice called out to them. Alice. It was a woman, her face lined with age and hardship, but her eyes sparkled with recognition. I saw Eric just this morning. He mentioned something about needing some space. Do you know where he might be? Alice asked, her heart racing with urgency. The woman nodded slowly. He said something about heading to the old library. He often goes there to think. Thank you, Alice exclaimed, her gratitude spilling over. With renewed determination, she and Jake hurried toward the library, the shadows growing longer as the day wore on. When they arrived, the library stood tall and silent, its grand entrance welcoming yet intimidating. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old books. They searched through the aisles, calling out for Eric. Just as Alice was about to lose hope, she spotted him curled up in a corner, a book cradled in his arms. Eric, she called softly, approaching him. He looked up, his expression a mix of surprise and wariness. Alice, what are you doing here? He asked, sitting up straight, the book slipping from his hands onto the floor. We've been looking for you. I need to talk, she said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. Eric hesitated, glancing at Jake before looking back at Alice. "I don't know if there's much left to say." "Please," she urged, kneeling beside him. "I need to understand what happened. I think I've uncovered something about Vanessa, something that might help you." He studied her for a moment, uncertainty clouding his eyes. "Fine, but it's not easy to talk about." As they settled down, Alice could see the weight of his past pressing on him, ready to spill out like a flood of memories. She held her breath, knowing this conversation could change everything for both of them. The sun shone brightly on the park as Alice prepared for the event she had tirelessly organized. Colorful banners flapped gently in the breeze, and the scent of freshly baked goods wafted through the air, mingling with the laughter and chatter of the attendees. People from the community began to gather, their faces reflecting curiosity and hope. Alice stood at the entrance, her heart racing with anticipation as she spotted Eric among the crowd. He looked more at ease than she had ever seen him, his shoulders relaxed, a small smile gracing his lips. "Hey, Alice," Eric greeted, his voice warm and inviting. "This is amazing. I can't believe so many people came out to support." "They're here for you, Eric," Alice replied, her eyes shining with determination. "You deserve this. Everyone should know the real you." As the event kicked off, Alice introduced Eric to the audience, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "Thank you all for coming today. We're here to celebrate the kindness and strength of those among us, particularly Eric, who has faced unimaginable hardships yet has remained a beacon of hope." One by one, community members stepped forward to share their stories about Eric. A middle-aged woman with tears in her eyes spoke about how he had once helped her find her missing dog, staying out in the rain all night to assist her search. Another man, a former student of Eric's, spoke with reverence about the impact his teacher had made on his life. "He taught me that kindness can change the world, even if it feels like a small gesture," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. As the crowd listened, Alice felt a wave of relief wash over her. She could see the change in their expressions as they began to view Eric not as a pariah, but as a person deserving of empathy and love. However, in the back of the park, a shadow loomed. Vanessa, Alice's stepmother, watched the event unfold with a scowl, her lips pressed tightly together in anger. "Just wait," she muttered under her breath, her eyes narrowing as she plotted her next move. "I won't let this continue." As the event progressed, Alice noticed Vanessa slipping away, her mind racing with the possibilities of what she might do next. Determined not to let her stepmother ruin the day, Alice focused on Eric and the crowd. She could hear the laughter, the camaraderie, and the acceptance that was growing with each shared story. Just when the atmosphere seemed at its peak, Vanessa reappeared, a determined look on her face as she approached the microphone. "Excuse me, everyone," she called out, her voice cutting through the joyous chatter. "I need to address something important regarding this man you're all celebrating." Gasps rippled through the crowd as Alice's heart sank. "Mom, no," she pleaded. But Vanessa continued, relentless. "You all deserve to know the truth about Eric," she said, her tone dripping with feigned concern. "He isn't who you think he is. He has a dark past that I believe you should be aware of before you place your trust in him." "Enough," Alice shouted, stepping forward, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "You don't know what you're talking about, Vanessa. Eric is not defined by his past, but by his actions today. He has shown nothing but kindness and resilience." The crowd murmured in agreement, rallying around Alice. Eric stood beside her, looking both grateful and anxious, unsure of how to respond to the confrontation. "Don't listen to her," he called out, his voice stronger than before. "I made mistakes, yes, but I've changed. I'm not that person anymore. I've spent my life trying to make amends, and I refuse to let anyone take that away from me." Alice's heart swelled with pride as she watched Eric stand up for himself, the strength he had displayed igniting a fire within her. "We are here to support each other, to lift each other up," she declared, her voice filled with passion. "Not to tear each other down." Vanessa's face flushed with anger, but the tide had turned. The community began to rally behind Alice and Eric, voices rising in unison, drowning out Vanessa's attempts to undermine them. Let's show Eric the compassion he deserves, a woman shouted, and the crowd erupted into applause, their support resonating in the air. As the event concluded, Alice felt a surge of hope. She had witnessed a bridge being built between Eric and the community, one that could not easily be destroyed. In that moment, she received an anonymous note slipped into her hand, its paper worn and crumpled. "Look into the past," it read ominously. "The truth about Vanessa will come to light." Alice's heart raced as she tucked the note into her pocket, a new determination flooding her veins. Whatever it took, she would uncover the truth and protect Eric. The path to redemption was just beginning, and she was ready to face whatever lay ahead. Alice stood in the dimly lit living room, a stack of papers clutched tightly in her hand. The evidence she'd gathered felt heavy with the weight of truth, and the air was thick with tension as she prepared to confront Vanessa. Her heart raced, part fear and part determination. This was the moment she had been building towards, a chance to unveil the darkness that had shadowed her life and the lives of others for too long. "Vanessa," Alice called, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "We need to talk. Now." Vanessa emerged from the kitchen, her expression a mix of annoyance and curiosity. "What is it, Alice?" "I'm busy. Can't this wait?" "No," Alice replied firmly. She stepped closer, the papers trembling slightly in her grip. "I found something. Something that changes everything." Vanessa's brow furrowed. "What do you mean? If this is about that homeless man again..." "This is about Eric, yes," Alice interrupted. "And it's about you." She thrust the papers toward her stepmother, her voice rising with each word. "You can't keep hiding from your past. I know what you did to him." Vanessa snatched the papers, her eyes scanning the contents. "You think these scraps of paper mean anything? This is just..." "No," Alice shouted, cutting her off. "This is proof of your lies, your manipulation. You orchestrated his downfall to cover your own scandal. You framed him, Vanessa." For a moment, silence enveloped the room, thick and suffocating. Vanessa's expression shifted from disbelief to a mask of anger. "You have no idea what you're talking about," she spat, her voice laced with venom. "I did what I had to do to survive. Eric was a threat, and you're too naive to see it." "Maybe I was naive," Alice said, her voice softening. "But I refuse to let you continue to hurt others to protect your reputation. Eric deserves justice. He deserves to be heard." Vanessa's lips curled into a cruel smile, but there was a flicker of something else. "Fear? Regret? You think you can stand against me? I'm your mother, Alice. I raised you to be better than this." "No, you raised me to be like you, selfish and cruel. But I won't be like that anymore," Alice countered, her heart pounding with every word. "I'm going to help Eric, and I'm going to expose you." At that moment, the door swung open, and Eric stepped inside, his face weary but determined. "Alice, I came as soon as I got your message. What's going on?" Alice turned, relief flooding her. "Eric, Before she could finish, Vanessa's rage erupted. "You!" she yelled, pointing an accusatory finger at Eric. "Stay out of this. You have no right to come into my home." "Your home?" Eric's voice was low, steady. "You've turned this place into a prison for your stepdaughter. Alice is stronger than you think, and she deserves to know the truth." Vanessa's face contorted in fury. "You think you can just waltz in here and play the victim? You're nothing but a homeless criminal." "Enough," Alice shouted, stepping between them. "This isn't about you anymore, Vanessa. It's about the lives you've destroyed. Eric was wrongfully accused because you needed a scapegoat. I have the evidence to prove it." The tension in the room crackled like electricity as Vanessa's facade began to crack. "You don't understand the consequences of your actions, Alice. If you expose me, you'll ruin your own future." "I'd rather have a future built on truth than one built on lies," Alice replied, her voice unwavering. "And I won't stand by while you continue to hurt others." As the confrontation continued, the doorbell rang. It was the community members Alice had rallied, drawn by her call to support Eric. They filed into the living room, confusion and concern etched on their faces as they took in the scene. "What's happening here?" one of them asked, glancing between Alice, Eric, and Vanessa. "This is about to be the truth revealed," Alice declared, her voice rising with newfound confidence. "Eric was framed, and Vanessa is the reason why. It's time for everyone to know." The crowd murmured, their expressions shifting from confusion to understanding as they began to grasp the gravity of the situation. Eric stepped forward, his voice strong. "I lost everything because of a lie. But today, we can change that." With the community behind them, the tide began to turn. Together, they uncovered the truth, exposing Vanessa's manipulations and bringing to light the wrongful accusations against Eric. As the story spread, support for Alice and Eric grew, transforming their fight for justice into a movement for change. In the aftermath, Vanessa's empire of deceit crumbled, leading to her arrest. The community rallied around Alice and Eric, who found purpose in helping others like him, paving the way for a non-profit organization dedicated to providing support for the homeless. As they stood together, Alice looked at Eric, a sense of fulfillment washing over her. "We did it," she whispered, tears of joy glistening in her eyes. "Yes," Eric replied with a smile. "And now we can help others find their own redemption."